can we afford this food? Other sustainable changes that we could do is also choosing traditional foods. Healthy eating is often seen as expensive or unrealistic, which is the case because there's quite a big gap between socio-economic communities within Namibia. We can add vegetables to our plate. I think given that our body only takes a section that it needs to use for energy within that moment, working together to improve the nutrition and food security within Namibia. It's better buying one thing off once a month rather than buying every other week. I am a nutritionist at the Nutrition and Food Security Alliance of Namibia. So to start off, I'd like to introduce what NAFSAN is in general. So the Nutrition and Food Security Alliance of Namibia is a civil society organization, or should I say platform, that works with government agencies as well as civil society organizations, also known as NGOs, and as well as private sector, working together to improve the Nutrition and Food Security Alliance, working together to improve the nutrition and food security within Namibia. So with that said, we are an umbrella body and not an implementing body, therefore civil society umbrella body. So what we do is develop educational material. I think you have been at our stand where we have a lot of material in terms of nutrition that we usually give out during Nutrition for Health trainings, as well as coordinate efforts between stakeholders, like I've mentioned before, government agencies, civil society organizations or NGOs, as well as private sectors. And then the last but not least, we advocate for improved policies such as the breastfeeding children, water, agroecology, sugar tax, and as well as the BIG. So into nutrition of what I really came for. Healthy eating is often seen as expensive or unrealistic, which is the case because there's quite a big gap between socio-economic communities within Namibia. So what is actually possible for most households? Healthy eating is influenced by a lot of things. One, accessibility to food. How far is the location that we have to purchase this food, this vegetable that we think is expensive? Affordability. Can we afford this food? How much is it that we are going to invest into what we eat? Knowledge. Are we knowledgeable on where we can get this stuff? Are we knowledgeable on how important it is for our bodies? And all of those. So again, not everybody can choose this ideal foods because of knowledge that comes to it, but it is not a limitation. So what does realistic really mean? Small sustainable changes. Like Philip has mentioned earlier, we can add vegetables to our plate. I think you can see a healthy plate that I've placed down there, which I will explain shortly, as well as watching our portion sizes. As you see, our healthy plate here has been sectioned very beautifully, but it doesn't have to be exactly like it is in the picture. For as long as half the plate is vegetables, quarter of the plate is your starches, and quarter of the plate is your proteins. Now, I'm not only advocating for having more vegetables on the plate because I'm a nutritionist and I want you to eat vegetables all the time, but there is a reason as to why it is actually sectioned like that. So carbs is our main source of energy, but then too much consumption of it is what we say is converted into fats through a process called lipogenesis. Yeah? So usually our Namibian plates quite have a lot of pap, a lot of rice, a lot of macaroni on the plate, and given that our body only takes a section that it needs to use for energy within that moment. And again, through the process of lipogenesis, it is converted to fat so that it can be used later on for energy. But then again, it is a needed necessity, but too much of it can also be bad, yeah? Because now we don't want a lot of fat accumulating within the body. And then we have the protein that helps build our muscles. We need it a lot because, and I also want to emphasize that when it comes to proteins, we have animal protein and then the plant protein. Now, when it comes to the animal protein, we also have to be aware to remove the visible fat that is written on the meat. Because that's the bad fats. That's the fat that goes and accumulates within the body. So this is the visible fat on the meat, and this is the chicken skin on the chicken itself. So those are the things that we have to remove when we're eating this stuff. And I also wanted to mention that carbs is one of those things that digest quite quickly in the body. So after an hour or two, we are already hungry after consuming a large plate of carbs. That's why our plate is our vegetables, which not only improves our immune system, but also has one important component, which is called fiber, which takes a bit longer to digest within the body. Now, given that it takes a bit longer to digest within the body, you get the feeling of being full for a longer period of time. So you won't constantly want to snack on something after every other hour. Hence why the plate is like that. And other sustainable changes that we could do is also choosing traditional foods. This comes to terms of affordability. We have the dried spinach there, the mopane worms, and then there's a zabezi green that alternates for other sources of protein at local markets, and as well as spinach as protein. And then we have our sugar board here of all our favorite drinks with high amounts of sugar. I think we'll explain that later on by our stand. And then I wanted to emphasize on the local foods as to why we should also contribute into that, because they're quite affordable, they're quite nutritious, and they also promote diversity. And now, talking about affordability, things that we could actually do is buy in bulk. And I'm not saying buy in bulk as in quantities, but buying larger quantities instead. It's better buying one thing off once a month rather than buying every other week. Choosing seasonal foods that are quite cheaper during the season rather than purchasing it when it's not in season and it's quite expensive. And also I've put down a table there that explains as to what vegetables could be planted during those seasons. And then purchasing at local markets as well as eating simple meals. Backyard gardening, which could be a solution for affordability that will be explained later, and as well as reducing fast food that could save on costs. So now, family and community eating habits are shaped at home, cooking practices, shared responsibilities, shared meals, and early education. We all know that children pick up on what we do in our houses. I believe most of you still do what you have learned in your young childhood. So if we could teach these children early on in the nutrition knowledge, they could pass it on into the future. So with that said, physical activity always works along with nutrition. A 30-minute walk 2 or 3 times a week is needed, because healthy eating is not just eating healthy, but as well as being physically active. So with that said, healthy choices should be realistic and accessible. Healthy eating is not about perfection. You should do what you can with what you have. And our last statement would be that our choices is what become our practices become our habits, and before we know it, it becomes a lifestyle. So that's it, thank you.
Thank you, Liz, that was so energetic. Thank you. So we have about 15 minutes of Q&A. I know you have burning questions on how you can implement this into your lifestyle, into your everyday with your children, in your kitchen. So please feel free to ask questions and we can have a discussion. Testing.
I'd like to ask Elizabeth to educate us on the best protein source while limiting the fat intake.
Sorry, can you please repeat that?
The best protein source while limiting the fat intake that could lead to obesity and other associated lifestyle diseases that are non-communicable and a massive drain on our health budget.
Okay, perfect. Like I have mentioned earlier before, we have the plant-based protein, and then we have the animal-based protein.
Is one of them, but what other vegetables and fruits is fat, can supply fat for the body?
So most of it would come from kind of vegetable oil. So you have all the oils that you use for cooking, so it's things like olive oil, sunflower oil, canola oil, all of those things will contribute to your fat intake from as a plant-based source. Yeah. And obviously, so nuts and seeds contain a lot of also good fats, especially. So if you're looking at your fat intake and you want to focus on the healthier kind of fats, you would want to focus on nuts and seeds. Avocados are great, olive oil is great. Canola oil is a great option that's a little bit cheaper than olive oil, but has pretty much the same or a very similar profile of what is contained in the fat. So those are all great options. With the, I know nowadays there's a lot of conflict about seed oils, especially. One of the biggest things there is that we don't want to heat them too high, and also a lot of things nowadays contain fats, because if you go out to a restaurant you get fast food, it tastes nice because it's deep fried in a lot of oil. So that's where most of the problem comes from. It's very easy to overconsume, but if you have a little bit of even sunflower oil, which really gets a bad rap nowadays, if you have a little bit of that raw on your salad, if you drizzle a teaspoon of that on there, it's not a problem at all. It still has good attributes. So the biggest problem with oil is it's just very easy to overconsume.
Zambezi bream. Where do we find them?
Sorry, I meant to say the fish itself from the Zambezi brim, the Zambezi River. I think it's most common within the Rundu, Kavango West, Kavango East. And I think I was talking mainly to what it accommodates to what location you are. Say, for instance, the local foods that would be available, or something that you could alternate for, say, if you're in the...
Let's talk about the fish, and you take that discussion to the ministry. There's an observation that I want to share. There's ample fish available in Namibia. Fish shops in every town and village, normally operated in the semi-formal market, deep freezers without any branding of species, and that fish is non-eviscerated. You never really know what kind of cold chain is behind it. It's all frozen, there's no fresh fish, and I think that's very expressive of a joint problem that we have in our society, that we don't really value our nutrition. We have one of the richest fishing grounds in the world, and it's nearly impossible to get any fresh fish anywhere, anytime along the tarmacs. That is something, I think, in terms of campaigning, appreciation of our food generally, regardless of tribe and class, is very, very low. People feed themselves with sugar and with starch, like no man's business, and I think it's that composition leaning towards only the dense, the nutrient-rich, the energy-rich components of our food without the appreciation of the quality that is the product.
Thank you so much. I think we all